Verdun is a realistic, squad-based multiplayer FPS set in the First World War, and that's kind of a big deal. Take a look at the amount of World War II games, for example. Yeah, it's kind of long. And then in comparison, World War One. Yeah, there's not much choice. But wait, this one involves time travel? Oh, and this one has vampires and zombies in it. So yeah, Verdun is the first of its kind. But then, Battlefield 1 came out, a big budget AAA World War 1 game. So why aren't we all playing that instead? Now, to me, Battlefield 1 seems like a good game. The gunplay looks meaty and satisfying, the squad-based gameplay is apparently very good, and there's a lot of weapon variety. You see, my problem with Battlefield 1, besides the name, is that it might as well be put over there. There's no trench-based warfare, you can shoot a heavy MG accurately from the hip, and the only people with bolt-action rifles are snipers? I mean, it's okay to be silly and arcadey. Heck, I love TF2, and in that game you can fire an RPG at your feet to launch you in the air. The difference is that TF2 doesn't aspire to be realistic in the first place. So yes, Verdun is still the only real World War I multiplayer FPS right now. With that out of the way, let's take a look at the game. Wait, no, we have to talk about the options first, of course. It has everything you would want from a PC game, really. Runs above 120 FPS on Ultra with a 1070 and an i5, so there's no complaining about performance from me, although my 730 potato struggled keeping above 60 FPS at lowest and 720p, so not any old CSGO machine will do. You'll want to turn off these if you want good visibility. SSAA is disabled temporarily, but you can force it up in your control panel of choice. Or you could just use DSR. Let's talk about the graphics. It's a good looking game, for sure. It's no Frostbite or CryEngine, but it has high resolution textures, great lighting and shadows, and the art direction is amazing. Nothing feels out of place, and most maps have enough clarity that if you look well, you will spot an enemy lying in the grass. This is a good time to mention that this game is made in Unity. I didn't believe it either. There are 0 references to Unity in game or even in the credits. You have to dig into the game files to find out. So this is just another example that engine is usually not the problem, competence of the developers is. There are 4 game modes in Verdun. Rifle deathmatch consists of camping in a crater and hoping you don't get spotted by the other 10 players who are camping in craters. It's the worst game mode by far. Attrition is team deathmatch, slightly better than rifle deathmatch, but still not really worth your time. You see, deathmatch in a game like CSGO works because the maps are very closed off. This means you can defend an area with one other teammate effectively, which makes it not solely based around spawning behind people to get cheap kills. In an open battlefield, this doesn't really work. Besides, all the mechanics in this game revolve around slow tactical fights, not fast-paced running and gunning. Squad defense is hundreds of brain-dead bots running towards you, kind of like Guardian in CSGO, but with a squad of up to 4 players, and bots with overwhelming numbers instead of inhuman reaction times. And then there's Frontlines, the main game mode and what the game is designed around. It's an eye on the perfect implementation of trench warfare. So here's how it works. You're tasked with either defending or attacking a trench. As the attackers, it is your goal to capture the enemy trench. This is done by keeping yourself in the trench area and killing enough people inside it so that this circle begins to fill before the timer runs out. The timer can be lengthened by killing a lot of the defenders to gain momentum. If the timer runs out but there are still teammates in the enemy trench, it will go into foothold overtime. If overtime is stretched long enough, you get extra attack time. The more people of your team are in the trench, the faster it will capture. Once you capture a trench, you will need to defend it until the timer runs out. Alternatively, if you fail, you will need to fall back to your old trench to hold off the enemy's counterattack. You need to keep them out of your trench, and if they don't use cover effectively and their snipers don't take out your MGs, they might not even be able to get a foothold. Once the timer runs out, you start attacking again. Before I get into the gameplay, I have to talk about the gore. Let's see what happens when a grenade explodes under your feet in Verdun. Well, those ragdoll physics are nice, but that isn't really a realistic portrayal of what would really happen. It turns out, gore isn't on by default, so you have to enable it in the options menu. Now let's see what happens. Holy crap, did you see that? I'm just trying to imagine what it would be like back then, and this is probably the most honest depiction of it. Limbs flying everywhere, death animations which intermingle ragdoll physics with disturbing animations of people gasping for air or clenching onto a wound, loud screaming from critically wounded. It can get overwhelming, especially the first few times. I do recommend turning it on though, because it's an inherent part of the experience, in my opinion. So how's the gameplay itself? It's authentic, that's what it is. One shot kills almost every time for every weapon, with the exception of the pistols, which takes 2 hits at medium range if it's not a headshot. It's a real pixel hunt for the longer range battles, and the shooting itself is based more on skill than raw reaction time. You see, Verdun's bullets act like they would in real life. It takes time for them to travel to where you point when you shoot. This means that you need to lead your targets, like this. Your bullets also have a slight drop-off at long ranges. The effect is really minor, and that makes it all the harder to judge when you need to aim above someone and by how much. I've heard players complain that the netcode is bad because they can't hit shots when they're aiming right at them, but that's probably just them not leading their targets. I really want to talk about the weapons, but I have to get the squad system out of the way first. This is going to get complicated. So here's how you join a game of Frontlines in Verdun. You need to join a squad or create one yourself. There are no lone wolves in Verdun. A squad can hold up to 4 players, each with a different role. The grenadier gets grenades, the rifleman gets a bayonet. But to complicate things, there are different squad types, and those totally change all the loadouts, but they can also have completely different roles. Take the Highlanders and Chasseur Alpin. Their weapons are different, but their roles are the same and they serve the same purpose. Long range scouting. Compare that to the US Marines, a trench assault squad where you have short range weapons and grenades. The only role that stays consistent throughout is the NCO. The NCO is your squad leader. Staying within 15 meters of him will grant small passive bonuses like slightly lower reload times or faster stamina recovery. As an NCO, you can request some kind of support, which is squad specific. The Highlanders, for example, get a recon plane, which reveals all the enemies on your minimap, while the Marines can deploy a smokescreen to obscure the defender's line of sight. But there's also artillery and gas. The NCO can also appoint an area to defend or attack. This also gives small buffs and gives you some bonus followed order XP. From all this, the NCO may sound kind of unbalanced, but he really isn't. You see, he gets relatively weak weapons and dead squad mates spawn on him, so that's a huge responsibility. If the NCO dies, he and his team have to walk all the way across no man's land to get back in the trench, and in that time, the enemy could have pried out your team and then you have to start all over again. So as an NCO you need to keep close to the front lines, but avoid actual fighting as much as you can. Before I get into the weapons, I have to talk about some more aspects of the gameplay which I forgot before. When you aim down sight, you will notice that your gun isn't exactly stable. You can stabilize it momentarily, or you can lay down to make it more stable. Reloading any gun takes a long time compared to other games, but it's more realistic. You have to understand that these are not elite special forces. These are farmers, factory workers that got recruited on short notice, and when you're getting shot at, it's probably a bit harder to concentrate on such a task. As a gameplay mechanic, this makes deciding when to reload a vital skill to master. Should you reload every bullet so that you're prepared for the worst? Or should you wait until you can use the stripper clip to maximize your rate of fire? When you get shot at a lot, you will start flinching. As I said, this game is very authentic. You try keeping calm when every single one of those bullets could kill you. It also makes it so that if you keep missing, you're still helping a teammate that didn't get shot because your target is distracted.
Hey, Cook! You reinforcements?
Yeah. We're on our way up to Wipers.
Wouldn't go up there if I were you. They've got a shortage.
What of? Ammunition?
No. Coffins.
Yeah, there certainly isn't a shortage of ammunition. Get 90 bullets for your bolt action rifles. That's 18 stripper clips. You have a similar amount of reserve magazines for your pistols. The only guns that have a risk of running dry are the machine guns. But even then you have a sidearm to fall back on. It makes you think why they even bothered with reserve ammunition. But then again, I don't think infinite reserve ammo would go well with the realism crowd. Now I can finally talk about the weapons. Bolt action rifles are the most common by far. Nearly every class has... oh darn it. I still have some explaining to do. Now, I've already told you that you can change your loadout by switching roles, but within these roles, there are also 3 specializations. For some roles, this specializes them more, but for others, it just gives you more options. But you have to unlock them first. They all cost 1 career point. You get career points for leveling up. Fortunately, you level up really quickly, and you get a lot of them when you do. I didn't start unlocking until level 10, because I was still getting to grips with the starter weapons, and I never ran out by unlocking as I went. So yeah, bolt action rifles are the most common, and nearly every class, even the NCO, has a specialization with one, and with good reason. They are very good at long and medium range, and they're not terrible at close range either. They all feel different, even though they all operate in the same way. I love this one for example, and I really dislike this one. The pistols are garbage at longer ranges, but can be effective at medium ranges in the hands of a skilled player. When fighting in the trench however, pistols become great. Their ability to take aim swiftly and fire semi-auto puts them miles above bolt actions. Machine guns are great for defense. Their biggest downside is that they need to be deployed before you can fire them, although some, like the Shoko, can be fired from the hip. That's really inaccurate, so you can use it if you're caught off guard in the trenches as a last ditch effort, but not much else. Snipers live to take down the MGs. When an attacker gets shot at and doesn't die, he can usually at least attempt to take out the defender. This is way harder against MGs due to their high rate of fire and suppressing power. The sniper can hold back and take out the MG from far away.
But Mondolider, doesn't that make it overpowered?
No. Let me explain myself. The hardest part about being a sniper is spotting the enemy. The scope has an incredibly narrow field of view. It's made for lining up your targets, not finding them in the first place. You're better off just looking carefully. Your eyes are pretty good at detecting movement when all else is motionless. So remember, if you see a sniper doing this, he's probably not idling, but looking for possible targets. MGs are usually pretty easy to spot. Their constant muzzle flashing and high fire rate makes them stand out. Finding regular soldiers is harder, because they like changing their position, and they don't shoot as often. But targeting regular soldiers is not really useful for the team in the first place. You are more helpful if you just get in the trench like the rest of us. You always have the option to switch to iron sights. This begs the question, however, why anyone would ever choose the rifle without a scope. Well, if you're needed more in the trenches than at the back, this scope becomes a huge obstruction, which is exactly what you don't want when you're trying to spot enemies hiding in corners quickly. A scope does give you a slight edge when you're defending though. And then there's the automatic weapons. In Battlefield 1 they probably thought if we're going to give one person an automatic rifle, it's going to be unbalanced, so we're just going to give them to everyone. And in Verdun it might seem unfair that one guy has such an advantage over you, but their greatest advantage is also their greatest weakness. I hate WM1 pyros in Team Fortress 2. Their unskilled but very powerful playstyle, I don't mind. It's the fact that they always seem to come out of nowhere at the most inopportune of times that has made me rage quit more times than I can count. The BAR and MP18 in Verdun, on the other hand, have very distinct sounds. This gets everybody who has played the game for more than 5 hours to focus their attention on that bastard with the overpowered weapon. And remember, he may have a better weapon than you, but he is still just as vulnerable as you. The recoil on those things is also so great that you're better off just tap firing, using it like a rifle with a slightly higher fire rate. The flamethrower is also a contender for being overpowered, but it takes half a second to get the flames going, so you'll want to hold down that left mouse button when moving around the trench. But this makes it even worse than the automatic guns in terms of people flanking you to get rid of you. Moving on, grenades are your best weapon in the trenches. There's usually a lot of people packed together and you can lob them over without exposing yourself. They do have a weird arc, so that takes some time to get used to. They're also not as bouncy as the ones in CSGO, so keep that in mind. Now I can finally talk about the melee combat. You can bash people 2 times with any weapon to kill them. I don't recommend this unless you're in a situation like this. A bayonet increases your melee range and is a one-hit kill. It's really useful if you catch your enemy from behind. You only have a couple of bullets in your gun in most situations, so you'll want to save those bullets for the longer range fights. You can also play as the grenade shoveler. He only has a shovel and 5 grenades. Well, that went better than intended. Look, I even got the most kills in my squad with this method. And these guys are at the highest level in the game. Let's talk about the music. Well, there isn't much beside the record player in the main menu, but there are different theme tunes which play at the beginning of a match, depending on what squad type you are. I especially like this one. And there's also some music which plays at the last minute of each match. It's good. I have to say though, they nailed the songs on the record player. Their glorification of the war and their merry attitude makes a sharp contrast with the actual fighting. While I'm on the topic of sounds, we might as well discuss the ambient sounds. It's amazing, and it really makes you feel like there's a war going on outside of your own battle. For the maps, I'm going to have to bust out some statistics. You see, the most balanced maps are usually the most liked. Just look at CSGO. If you didn't know, this game is named after the Battle of Verdun. This battle mainly took place in the forts around the city. One of these forts, Fort Douaumont, is the centerpiece of the Fort Douaumont map in Verdun. So how is the map of the place the game is named after? Terrible. The main problem is the fort itself. It features a lot of openings on the Entente side, but it has only 3 openings on the Central Powers side. This makes it impossible for the Germans to recapture the fort. This is also reflected in the statistics. Nearly half of the matches end in a win for the Entente Powers. The fort also has a lot of nooks and crannies which make the fort just plain annoying to clear out. It's generally regarded as the worst map in the game. The Flanders map takes place in the Ypres salient. The dark mud makes it harder to spot enemies, and the shell holes make nice places to chill out for a while.
I think we made it.
Nice, ain't it? Aye. And peaceful.
The trenches are well designed and the map is quite balanced, except for the fact that over half the games end in a draw. Most maps in Verdun are like this, just with different terrain and scenery. One controversial map stands out however, Champagne. Champagne does a lot of things different. The most apparent change is that it takes place at night. I usually don't like night maps. It's harder to spot enemies and it's just generally not that pretty. Well, Champagne at least solves the visibility issue. The moon apparently shines very bright in France. The biggest change to the gameplay is that it's basically one big trenched network. There's practically no no-man's land. Some people really dislike this map for that reason. I think it's rather refreshing to have a map that consists only of trench fighting. It's good training, though I don't recommend it for new players. They don't call it the maze without reason. All the maps are laden with barbed wire. It's easy to avoid once you play for a while, but if you do get stuck, you need to walk out of it, not sprint. You can jump over these with some practice. Just make sure to jump over the ends, not the middle. I've already made it clear that this game is very authentic in a lot of different ways, but I want to point out some more details. Some people might say that it's okay to make tanks and airships less common, but that they shouldn't be ignored completely. And Verdun doesn't do that. The Picardy scenario takes place at the end of the war and it shows. There are broken down tanks, an airplane has crashed in the middle, and in the distance airships are floating about.
Ils ne passeront pas! Tenez la ligne! Oui! Retourne dans les jupons du Kaiser! Le débois nous appelle!
It goes without saying, but the voice acting is amazing. Every faction speaks in their own language. Not only does this help to immerse you, it also makes it easy to recognize friend from foe. I would way rather have this than Hollywood actors faking an accent.
Listen, we don't have long.
But a multiplayer game is nothing without an active community. So how is it? It's a relatively small but loyal community. The lowest amount of concurrent plays is around 100. Do keep in mind that the player base is split among different regions though. In Europe there's always at least one nearly full match going on in the mornings, and every map has multiple matches in the evenings. It's small but not dead. There are even active clans which organize matches against each other, like the Soldiers of the Gas or the Trench Acrobats. They even have competitive leagues. There are also groups that organize 64-player matches. Even for the less active regions, like Australia, people try to organize events to populate servers for a while. Really, the only thing working against this game is its lack of polish in certain areas. The movement feels janky, especially compared to games like CSGO, and bugs, although they usually don't interfere with gameplay, are a frequent occurrence. I've had 3 of these in my 50 hours of playing, for example. This is mostly due to the small development team and the fact that this is their first game. If you can't handle these hiccups, which are bound to happen with indie games, you can stick with Battlefield 1. Although I don't see why it isn't possible to like both. So there you have it. Verdun is an acquired taste, but if you like it, you can have a great time with it. It's my favorite multiplayer game at the moment, but I don't see it dethroning TF2 and CSGO as all-time favorites anytime soon. Keep in mind that I've been playing solo for all the 50 hours I've put into the game, so it's possibly even better with friends. I'd highly recommend buying it, playing it for under 2 hours, deciding if you like it or not for yourself, and refund it if you don't like it or if you want to buy a 4-player bundle so you can play with friends. Anyway, I have to wrap up now. See you in the trenches. Don't we pity the poor civilian sitting around the fire? Oh, 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 it's a lovely war. Who wouldn't be a soldier, eh? Oh, it's a shame to take the pay. As soon as your belly is gone, we feel just as heavy as lead, but we never get up till the sergeant brings